So, when did counseling stop being about problem solving? Well, not anymore. Introducing solution-focused counseling with the unlicensed counselor. And now, here's your host, Steve Moak.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor, and today is a beautiful day in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. So grateful to be here as always. Have a fun little topic to bring to your eyes and ears. You know, if you've listened to the show for any period of time, you know I'm sober. I stopped drinking about 10 years ago. Not about, it was 10 years ago, September 11th, 2014, if you're being precise. I had a problem with drugs and alcohol. And, one of the things when you get sober and then, I got divorced over, blah, blah, blah. Listen to some of the old episodes. I don't need to rehash all of that. But now, as you're entering the dating world again, being a person who doesn't drink and going into dating is a little bit different, right? Just a little bit different. So, as I've been out there in the world kind of experiencing some of this, I wanted to share some insights and some things that I've learned along the way. Some things that make people nervous about sober drinking, some positives and negatives about being sober and dating and all those types of things. So it's just been on my mind a little bit, and I've kind of learned this, call it the hard way. But honestly, it hasn't been as challenging, I think, as most people think in their mind when you first stop drinking. Things are going to be when you go out and start dating. But it is an adjustment. I will say that. There's no getting around that. But before we start the meat of the episode, let me take a second and say thank you to our friends at BuzzBend Media. Go to BuzzBend Media. That's BUZ1Z Media.com. This is the advertising program that pays you to put decals on the side of your trash can. $10 a month. All you have to do is go to the BuzzBend Media website, sign up. New resident enrollment form costs you nothing. They ship you out some decals. You take a picture to show that you put them on the can. Boom, you start getting cash in your inbox every single month. Go to BuzzBendMedia.com. Why not sign up for this kind of cool little service? And a big thank you to them for sponsoring the show. And I also like to plug the nonprofit work that I do at the StopStartsHere.org. This is the youth drug abuse prevention site that I co-founded with a couple other individuals. This is all about youth drug prevention, something I'm very passionate about. If you don't ever want your son or daughter to have a problem with drugs, the best way to go about it is never having them start. We get into that at the StopStartsHere.org. Go ahead, give us a follow. Parents, download the Parents Prevention Playbook for some tips and tricks on how to prevent them from ever starting. Last but not least, I like to plug myself, the Unlicensed Counselor, as well. Give us a follow over at YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all the usual places you follow. We put up all the clips from this show in case you don't have 30 minutes to kind of tune in, which I hope that you do. But you'll find some clips and sound bites on some interesting topics, and always good to follow us. And we always appreciate you subscribing and downloading the show as well, too. So let's get into it. This is a fun little topic that I had on my mind. First, let's start by why sober dating is challenging, right? And it is challenging. It's just different. Look, I watch a lot of social media and stuff just around dating because I'm always curious to see kind of female side of it, male side of it, and kind of what's going on. And dating in general gets kind of a bad or tough rap. Now you throw in kind of this I don't drink side of this thing into the equation, it can get a little challenging, or at least the perception can be pretty challenging pretty quickly. But let's dig into it. A lot of people use alcohol as a crutch, right? You don't know how to navigate a lot of these social interactions. You don't know how to flirt if you don't have a drink in your hand. And it's like you have the training wheels on, and now you don't. And it's like, what do I do? How do I say? How do I strike up this conversation? You got the nerves. You got the anxiousness. People are just used to having a glass of wine, having a beer, having a shot or two, and all of a sudden it kind of loosens you up, right? You're kind of feeling like you can talk to anybody at the bar, and it seems a little bit easier. So it's that kind of natural lubricant, right? So alcohol just is a crutch. And when you take that away, it's a little bit different when you're having those first kind of interactions as well, too. You notice things a little bit more, something I find as well, too. The other part about why sober dating is challenging is kind of that fear of missing out, that FOMO that you've probably heard about. So society glorifies this drinking culture, and while being sober might, be fun, you might feel like you're missing out on some of the other dating experiences. You hear people that go out and they have happy hour and it rolls into an evening, and all of a sudden all these escapades kind of happen. When you're sober, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't happen, but certainly compared to when I was drinking, these kind of escapades would unfold. But along with those escapades come a lot of regret that I find in my previous history as well, too. But you might have a little bit of that fear of missing out when you're kind of in the sober dating thought. The other thing I've noticed, and this is something, I've definitely experienced, is overthinking. When you're sober, you notice everything, right? You notice everything. And when I was drinking, a lot of times you may not notice a lot of these little things, the awkward silences, the red flags. I just think I'm watching my words a little bit because I got a couple ex-wives along the way here and some potential dating prospects as well, too, that may go right to this episode. But some red flags you'll notice that maybe if you're drinking, you kind of gloss over a little bit more, and then all of a sudden you end up in a relationship 6 months, a year later, and you're like, oh, crap. We've been drinking throughout this entire relationship, and, I didn't even notice that this XYZ thing is really not something I'm a fan of, or it irritates me or annoys me, but your whole relationship's kind of been booze-centered or involved alcohol, and maybe you missed a lot of these things. Alcohol kind of blurs a lot of these things a lot of time, and sobriety kind of forces you to see them there in the moment, right? Which is really good. I mean, it's something that I'm glad that I have the clarity when we're going out. The other thing that it does do is that it makes you kind of have to have these conversations like, hey, I just don't think it's a fit. and truthfully, that's something I'm still working on, because you go out on a couple dates, and I really enjoy dating, and I don't find the challenge necessarily in dating or sober dating for that matter. But then it's like, oh, I see things, or I'm very aware of my values now, whereas before it was like, it's fun, it's drinks, we go out, cute, have fun, whatever happens, happens. Now it's like, oh, that's not going to work for me. Then I've had to practice having this conversation of like, hey, you know what? I think you're awesome, but it's just, I don't think it's the right time, right thing. I don't think it's a match for me kind of thing, right? But there's a lot of overthinking that can happen in these situations. The other thing is, let's say the other person is having a cocktail. Now you're feeling like the odd person out in this situation. There can be a noticeable dynamic or a shift there when one person is drinking and the other person's kind of not drinking. So it's just something that it's like, it can kind of just feel a little off, right? If you're not drinking and the other person is. Now, the other person's kind of ordering several cocktails, and I went on a drink with a couple dates with a very cute girl, and she was getting after it a little bit. A petite little cute girl, and it was like, I would say 3, 4, 5 glasses of wine kind of thing, and I'm just looking at her like, okay, in one sense, my brain is still going, well, this could be good. I mean, she's feeling good and having fun and all this kind of stuff. And, there's that half of my brain, and I got like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. It's like, well, this is a little too much, I think, at the same time. I mean, she's, 130 pounds or something like that. It seems excessive. She drove here. It's just like, it's all these kind of things kind of running through your head, and it creates these interesting dynamics. Now, honestly, that out of lots and lots of dates, that's only happened the one time. The rest of the time, it's usually maybe the person has a cocktail or a glass of wine, and oftentimes not. And so these things that you blow up in your head about what it could be like and what it really is often don't come to fruition, is something I've found. And it can tie into, I've had an addiction issue in the past, right? Very clear and outright. Alcohol and drugs, both a problem. Alcohol first, drugs right there with it. A lot of people don't drink just because of the health aspect and things like that. And I think it's awesome that there's a whole movement around kind of being healthy now. For me, I don't have any shame around my past, but then it's like, do I have to explain this every single time? Do I have to share? Am I oversharing? Do I even need to get into this right away before I know if this is somebody I'm even into? And at times I feel like I do, because alcohol is a really important thing to them, not because they have a problem, but that's just part of how they enjoy things. We'll have to see if that's going to be a fit for me either way. So it's just this kind of balancing act of kind of understanding where you're at in the relationship or friendship or dating, and when to share, what not to share. It's these tricky little things. And again, especially if you've had a problem with it, it's like, okay, all right, am I going to have to get into this whole story now? Like, how much do I have to share? Like, then they'll ask questions. Have you ever, and it's like, okay. Or then they had an ex who had some problems as well, too. Now you get thrown in the same bucket with the last guy that they dated and had a problem. It's like, I can't freaking win sometimes. You know what I mean? So it's interesting, this sober shame thing. And then alcohol can be used as a screening tool sometimes because it lowers some inhibition. So some daters use it as a real version to see someone, right? Without it, you might feel pressure to prove yourself differently. This is just another one of these little things that why alcohol and dating really can be challenging. But let's get into why some people are nervous about sober dating. I was very nervous about it. Not only was I nervous about that, I had never been on the dating apps and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm 40-something years old now, divorced, I have a daughter now. I don't go out and hang out at the bars. You know, Old Town Scottsdale's right over my shoulder. That's just not my thing anymore. So I got to get connected in a way to start to meet people because I want to get out there after an appropriate amount of time from my divorce, which is a year plus, truthfully. So I had a lot of these same butterflies, feelings, nervousness, anxieties kind of thing. But it's like, okay, what's really going on in my brain? But here's just a list of some of the things on why I think some people may be nervous about sober dating. It's you fear of being boring, right? Let's face it. You know, some people associate drinking with fun. You know, they just kind of go hand in hand. You might feel like your date might think you're boring or not as fun because you don't drink, right? It's not really true, but I know especially people who've had a problem with alcohol, and I'm speaking for that perspective. There's so much of the I don't drink because of the health aspect, which is awesome. But for those of us who've had a problem and then we get asked, it's like, I'm not going to lie about it. I'm not going to hide about it, especially me. I mean, I've got nonprofit, Not My Kid. I got nonprofit Hard Stop. I got a podcast that talks about all these things. I mean, I am very vocal about my problem with drug and alcohol use over the past. So it's like, let's not hide anything. But then you got to just be careful on the oversharing side of this. The other thing about why some people might be nervous about this is that societal awkwardness that can come along with this. So many first dates will happen at bars. Turning down a drink can kind of lead to an uncomfortable exchange. So, and you don't want to get kind of that judgment going along as well. When I plan dates, because I like to plan the dates, I never plan them at a bar. One of my things is like, hey, it's just dinner. Can we get together for dinner? It's on me. If it goes great, great. If it doesn't, you just met a new person who's a friend and a nice person, and we go our separate ways. And no harm, no foul. And I literally have that in my dating profile as well, too. So I don't choose to go meet at a bar or happy hour. And candidly, I have like a 3-picture minimum or maximum of if she's got a drink in her hand in her profile. This is Steve, the unlicensed counselor, talking. It's like, if that's the pictures you're putting up, you like to have a little bit of fun, cool. Probably not going to be a good thing for me. And that's just something I've developed over time. It's like, okay, picture with drink, picture with drink, picture with drink, picture with drink. Okay, we're gonna keep going over there, right? And then I don't plan the drink, the things at the bar either, right? And usually, I don't. That's just little things that I do along the way to kind of help. This one is true though. The next one about sober dating is intimacy fears. So without alcohol, physical affection or flirting feels more raw and vulnerable. It's harder to mask your nerves, your anxiety when you're not drinking, right? I mean, I've had plenty of dating experience in the past with drinking, and things would kind of progress. She was drinking, I was drinking, progress into how they progress, and you end up at somebody's house or spending the night and doing whatever along the way. When you're sober and you're in control of all your faculties and all those things, it's a little bit different. You're back at your house, you got the movie on, you're chilling, things start to, it's just making the first move, and it's a very different dynamic, right? In terms of kind of getting comfortable with that. I'm much more respectful now, not that it wasn't before, but it's like, things just kind of happen a little bit more quickly and easier when alcohol is kind of involved. So you get these kind of thoughts in your head, but once you kind of get into these situations, it seems to naturally work itself out, assuming the attraction's there and all those types of things. One of the other reasons I found that people get nervous about sober dating is kind of the preconceptions around sobriety as well, too. People may assume that you had a problem with alcohol or that you're high maintenance or that you can't be around it or all these types of things. People see things in movies and hear about AA and all that stuff. And, every person's recovery or reasons for not drinking is different. And that's why I think it's just really healthy to be able to have a conversation. And I don't think it requires a conversation on date one around all this stuff, too. I think figure out if this is a person you even want to kind of spend a little bit of time with, and then you can start to have the conversation like, you know what? I shut it down 10 years ago. Alcohol was a problem. I'm living a much better life without it. And then if it continues to progress, I think you can start to elaborate a little bit more on what exactly that means and what that looks like and why you choose not to drink as well, too. And if you're clicking, I mean, that person should understand, right? They should be able to understand what that is and hopefully put aside some of those preconceptions around sobriety and things like that. And again, a lot of people just don't drink for health reasons, which, I'm jealous. I wish I could say that. I'd be like, yeah, I like to run more. That's why I do it. I do, but I'd be lying because I'd be obfuscating, a couple drive-bys in the old rehab there as well too, right? So, the other thing that makes people nervous, you're going to get judged, right? You're going to get judged. If your date drinks heavily or frequently, it might clash with your values and make you question compatibility. Like, you're not drinking, she's judging you. I had this happen as well, too. It was like, again, super cute girl, and you're going out, and it's like, it was going pretty well, but she was enjoying her cocktails, right? And would regularly enjoy her cocktails. Doesn't bother me. I have no problem with the other person drinking or anything like that. But what started to happen is I think she started to become more aware of her drinking, and the amount that she was drinking because I'm not drinking. And I think it started to kind of make her uncomfortable. I'm not going to say with herself, but it was like, I'm drinking what I would say quite a bit. He's not. And now she's kind of becoming more aware of that. And then ultimately the compatibility just wasn't there. But I do think it was interesting. And I was not making her feel bad or judging, maybe a little judging, just because hey, I can't. I'm like, hey, that's your fifth glass of wine. You're a tiny little person, but it is what it is, right? And the other thing too is some people nervous about sober dating is, there could be people with past alcohol issues could have some trauma in their past as well too. I mean, that's a very common thing. Either the person who didn't have a problem could have dated someone who had a problem with drugs or alcohol in the past, and now you're sober. And again, this isn't, for me, this is 10 years ago that I had my last drink, so it's not like I'm just getting over something like that. But if somebody dated someone and maybe they're a little more raw, and it's like, oh, I just got out of a relationship because this person had a problem. That person either actively using or maybe they just got sober or something like that, or a year or two into their sobriety. You never quite know. But there's this whole thing of like now you're sharing that you're sober and this person had an experience that was really probably gut-wrenching for them. And it's like, oh, boy, that's bringing a lot of stuff to the table. That none of which is your fault. None of which is your fault, but interesting nonetheless. So, okay. Now, I've talked a little bit around challenges, nervousness. Let's talk about some of the positive things that can go along with sober dating, Arel. How about no drunk mistakes? How about that as a nice thing to have, right, in the world? No drunk mistakes, no waking up going, oh, God, like seriously, like, oh, did I wear a condom? Like, what did I do? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not going to say we've all been there, but some of us have been there a little bit more than others, right? And you don't want to wake up the next morning cringing over the bad decision or the slurred confession or whatever it is that you did last night. So that's off the table, right? I see you back there, Billy. I mean, look, we've all kind of been there, right? It is challenging. It's sad. When I was drinking a lot, I'd wake up in the morning and I would drink, and sometimes you black out, and it's like, who is this person? Why did I do this? And it's just like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. And it's like, is she even cute? It's like, come on. You know what I mean? It's a joke right there, okay? But look, just no drunk mistakes is a big positive, right? Here's the other thing I started to touch on too. Better radar for red flags. Look, gosh, I got to hold my tongue on some of these things. But look, you're able to identify things a little bit more quickly that might not be compatible with you, right? We've been out there, and a lot of times you meet somebody out at a bar. I met my first wife in Old Town Scottsdale, and she was not a problem drinker. I was a problem drinker, but we had a lot of what we did around drinking. And, we did that to a point, and then you're like, okay, we've been dating for 3.5 years. It's probably time to get married or something like that. I mean, that's the appropriate. We're late 20s, early 30s kind of thing. It's like, all right. But if your whole thing had been around drinking, have you ever really stepped back and not been drinking and make sure that your values are in line, the red flags that you've seen that you kind of washed over aren't things that are going to be potential deal breakers along the line? So you just have a little bit more clarity around that. And that's no offense to Sarah, my ex that I met down in Old Town. But it's like we'd be able to maybe find some incompatibility a little bit sooner if maybe booze wasn't at the center of every single thing that we did, right? I think it's also a positive is going to be better, longer lasting relationships. So sober dating, you're going to be able to find a deeper, more meaningful connection because the relationship isn't built on this superficial, chemically influenced dynamic, right? That's supercharged with booze and shots and martinis and dinners and trips and all this type of stuff. You're actually having to not force yourself, but sit down and get into these conversations and get into them sooner. And I think that's going to lead to, moving that person on if it's not working, or a better relationship with that person and a connection on a better level. And that's something that I'm really, excited about in my future dating prospects and being sober and all this is like, okay, I know my values now. I've done the work on myself to improve. I know what I'm looking for. Now, let's see if we can be really clear about that going into this and not kind of wander into a situationship where all of a sudden you're just kind of dating because she's cute, we're nice, I'm bored, you're bored, let's do this, let's have some fun kind of thing, right? I don't want any situationships. I think another positive is you're going to find some healthier experiences. Dating revolves around like coffee shops and hikes and nature walks. I've gone axe throwing. I've gone bowling. We've gone to stand-up shows, like not just sitting at the bar having a couple extra martinis and hoping that when one of us gets drunk enough to make some bad decisions, right? Like that was dating in the past and successfully in the past. And not just for me, for her too. I mean, we had there were lots of people along the way and we had some fun. But those are some of the positives around that. It's fun, and it should be fun, and make sure that it is fun as well, too. And take a little time, if you're nervous about this, to plan a date that kind of fits kind of your world, that's going to set you up for success, that is fun, and maybe isn't centered around, I'm not going to Old Town Scottsdale for my bars. I go to stand-up shows, and there's a 2-drink minimum, but you get me, some of those big tall boys of water, they're all the rage now, the cans, I can't remember what they're called now. But look, there's ways to plan yourself around it and have a good time on the date. Again, on the negative side of this thing, perceived mismatch, if your date enjoys drinking too much, they're going to feel judged, and that's just is what it is. The harsh reality of sober dating is it may lead to some fewer dating opportunities as well, too. Sober-friendly spaces aren't as common as alcohol-focused ones. Look, on the dating apps, you're able to put if you drink or don't drink. What I have found is a lot of times people don't really necessarily look at that in first drive-by. They're kind of, is he cute? Is she cute? Is he, what, da-da-da-da-da? And then you get a couple days into a chat, and it's like, I don't really drink anymore. And it's like, oh. And I always say, I'm like, look, if that didn't work for you, no, I don't take offense to that or anything like that. Feel free to move along. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But it's kind of nice to kind of clear the air. And again, I don't over text, especially get into some long diatribe about, well, it was September 10th, 2014. I was on my way, some long drawn out over explaining story about my drinking history or blackouts. Like, no. Another negative is, that constant pressure to feel like you have to explain. Don't. Save it, right? Just save it. Make sure this person's, going to be, someone who may be around for a little bit, and then kind of ease your way into the conversations. When asked, address it, and address it appropriately without over-explaining, too. And I'd find a way to either kind of make some light of yourself a little bit by also understanding that you learned from your mistakes or it was this part of the past and things like that. So, assuming you are genuinely sober. I don't know, California sober. I don't know how people feel about all that stuff. It's all different kinds of sober these days. I think we've done some other episodes on that. And the other negative around this too, and let's just call it what it is there could be some loneliness along the way, right? Not everybody's going to be willing to date someone who doesn't drink. Fewer people are willing to embrace the sober lifestyle. So, dating can be a little slower, which means you may feel a little loneliness along the way too, and that's okay. And to me, if you're not comfortable with being alone some as well too, it's kind of a red flag that maybe you shouldn't really be dating at the same time, right? Because if you can't be just comfortable in yourself and you kind of need that other person to kind of make you feel whole, validated, all that kind of stuff, to me that'd be like, that could be a problem. So, what are some ways to kind of overcome the fear of sober dating? Let's get to it, right? acknowledge that it could be a little bit uncomfortable along the way. It's okay to say sober dating is a little hard and that you'll sometimes feel awkward. That just is what it is, right? Own your own story along the way. Be honest and confident about your sobriety without over-explaining, I just feel better sober. It wasn't for me. I'm a healthier, better person without the booze, right? You can kind of leave it at that, and then over time, maybe you start to get a little bit more into your story and your past as this relationship kind of continues to develop. I think it's important to find some sober spaces and meetups. For me, I talk about hot yoga every single episode. I was there this morning. Just make sure you're kind of doing things that are in the sober space. And then I actually take dates to hot yoga as well, too, or to the gym. We'll shoot basketball. I find things that aren't alcohol related as the way to kind of get to know the people that I want to get to know. And if that doesn't work for them, to me, it's like, oh, well, that's would have never worked anyway. So I'm not really, just kind of moving on. I think you need to also get used to saying no, right? I mean, you're going to be out there. People are going to, what would you like to order? You get there, they give you the wine list. You're like, okay, just get used to saying no, declining that, feeling confident and kind of knowing how to handle that conversation. I'd have a couple things chambered as well, too. You can kind of practice that along the way. It's like, you know what? Not for me. By all means, help yourself. Doesn't bother me at all, but tonight I'm not going to be drinking. Again, I don't have to get into the entire backstory around why I don't drink as well, too. Focus on the person, not the venue as well, too. A good connection will matter more than whether that person, where you're at and what you're doing and all that stuff. Just kind of focus in on that person. Really try and see if this is a person that you're going to make a connection with. Make sure that you also understand your values and what you're looking for going into this dating thing as well, too. I think so many years of my dating history, it's like, is she cool? Is she cute? Is she hot? Is she fun? Does she like to have fun? That stuff would take you so far, and I'm not saying don't, use that to a degree, but understand the values of the things that you're truly looking for as you're getting ready to go into this dating world as well, too. And I think you're going to land on a better person, if that's what you're looking for. I mean, assuming you're looking for a partner to kind of get serious about. If that's not the case, then more power to you, and good luck out there in the world. And then last thing but not least, on kind of overcoming the fear of dating, shift the mindset, Remember that dating isn't about impressing the other person. It's are they a good match for you, right? So again, know your values. Be looking to see if they're a good match for you. And don't put all the pressure in the world on one date. Just use it as a way to get to know someone. And maybe it goes great. It could go great and they're still not the right person for you. And then you got to practice a conversation on how to kind of bow out of these things politely, too. That's one that took a little bit of work for me, too. So look, I mean, sober dating is challenging, but it's not impossible. It's a little scary at first, but it doesn't need to be. There are many ways to do this successfully. It just takes a little bit of practice, and the more you're able to do that, the more comfortable you're going to get with it as well, too. And in my opinion, when you're dating the right person, it's going to all kind of come together and become less and less of an issue as well, too. And candidly, out of so many dates that I've done over the last couple of years, it's like it really doesn't come up or is as big a thing as I always think it's going to be in my head, meaning we go out. I'm not going to be having a drink tonight. She usually doesn't have a drink anyways. We're out, having a nice little dinner, conversation. And then if we kind of hit it off and we go from there, we start to share a little bit more on and on. Don't have to put the weight of the world into every single date. It can be a conversation. Almost everybody I've met has been an amazing, nice person. Whether it works out, it turns into a relationship. I don't even care if that happens or not. But and if you need to go out on some dates and just practice some of these things, even if you're really not all that interested in that person, go out on a date and meet them and practice it, right? And just kind of see where it goes from there. So, look, sober dating, it's not as scary as you think. Get out there, give it a try. Let me know what you think. So, that's all we got for today. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor. Till next time, thank you very much.